Welcome to a special bonus episode of Pod Save America. I'm Jon Favreau.
I'm Jon Lovett.
And with us today, we have former chief speechwriter for President Obama. Not me, but Cody Keenan.
Friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod.
I don't know about that. Not me, Cody. How'd you feel about it?
Well, it was a weird thing to say. Cody, we got you right as you left the White House. I know Axe got you like on your last day.
Yeah, but that's like a life
on
story.
On the Axe file.
It's like, I was born, I lived. You know, we're going to get into it.
So we were all in the White House together, the three of us, from 2009 to when I left. When did you leave, Lovett?
Like end of 11, like the first term, basically.
Okay, so the first couple of years. Yeah, end of the first term, sort of.
3 years. I did the first 3 years.
And Cody and I worked together for a long time.
Slogged it out.
Cody, do you want to first tell us how you got the job with Obama? How you first tell the origin story?
Well, you hired me, which was a nice gesture on your part.
You're welcome.
The origin story was we had a mutual friend, Stephanie Cutter.
Yes.
Who I worked with in Ted Kennedy's office back in the old days. And she first approached me saying, you should consider writing for Barack Obama. And I was like, well, that's a nice pipe dream. How on earth is that going to work out? And she said, well, I know his chief speechwriter from the Kerry campaign days. So I can't remember exactly how we got put in touch, but I remember you called me one day. I was at Legal Seafoods in Boston. Classes had just ended at, I was in graduate school at Harvard, and we were all sitting outside having a couple beers, and you called.
Wait, where? Sorry, go on.
Sorry, am I not allowed to mention corporate sponsorship?
No. I meant the Harvard part. Legal Seafoods is great. Great clam chowder.
School in Boston.
Love Legal Seafoods.
Yeah, where are you guys? I'm going to direct message you guys. This isn't free.
I was drinking a delicious Leinenkugel.
Yeah, that's right. Which is amazing because I never return emails or phone calls.
I always say when people are like, how'd you get this job? It was a mix of luck and desperation. Luck on my part, desperation on yours.
Yeah, I needed help.
Yeah.
It was just me and Adam Frankel in the speechwriting office at the beginning of that campaign in 2007, writing everything.
When people ask me how I became a speechwriter at the White House, I say, because I was the most talented.
Yeah.
Anyway, Cody.
But I remember I tweeted a joke about a missed connection with you the other day. I remember on that phone call you said, what have you written before? And the truth is, I'd only written like 5 speeches for Ted Kennedy, and he usually ignored most of them anyway and did his own thing. But there was a speech for the RFK Human Rights Awards in 2005.
Oh, yeah.
And I wrote the Senator Kennedy speech for that, and you wrote Senator Obama's speech for that. And we connected that about that over the phone, that you and I were both standing in the back of the room, both nervous, watching our bosses give those speeches.
Just a couple of liberal kids with Kennedys as icons looking at... I can see. Lovett's not rolling his eyes yet, but I can feel that it's there.
Dreaming big dreams.
Dreaming big dreams. No, I remember.
I'm just thinking where I was, which was just like slogging it out in the Hillary Clinton Senate office, just trying to avoid eye contact so I wouldn't be fired.
But I do remember needing help really badly, and Cutter saying, "I have an intern," and I think I was most impressed by the Kennedy background because I'm also from Massachusetts, and I thought, a writer for Ted Kennedy, absolutely, let's do it. So you came on. You were the speechwriting office intern for a little while, and then you left us to go get your degree or whatever.
That was one of the hardest choices I ever made because I was just your intern for the summer of 2007.
Right.
And I remember, talking to you being like, what should I do? Should I skip this? Should I stay? And you and Pfeiffer both told me, you're like, here's the deal. We're putting all of our money into the field, as it should be.
Right.
We got to go out and win Iowa and whatnot. And you said, if you stay, you'll be my first hire once we win the primaries. So I thought about it. Ultimately, I decided not to and go back and finish school, and I just happened to get lucky that the primary stretched all the way out till June.
God damn.
And then I remember you called me again. It was like the day after Hillary conceded, and you were like, let's do this. And I was out there in 2 days, ready to go.
There's a lot of bio stuff, and also I wasn't there, so I don't really feel a part of this.
Let's relive the glory days of the campaign, which Lovett was working for Hillary Clinton at the time and lost. No, yeah, and then you came on, and we had our little speechwriting team. By that point, Rhodes had joined the crew.
Rhodes
Sarah
was there.
Hurwitz.
I sat like 5 feet from Tommy. I mean, it was a great time. Love it. You would have really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I was probably at the gym by then because Hillary had lost, and I was working in the Senate office, and there were no speeches to write.
So
I got fit, but I was very sad.
So then we all got to the White House, and we made one more hire, and that was Jon Lovett.
Oh, hello.
Because we had our team.
And then I was no longer the junior guy because we had Kyle O'Connor.
That's right. Kyle took over as intern on the campaign in 2008, and then we all got to the White House. And then Lovett was the newest guy, actually.
Yeah, watch what you say after that most.
I didn't say most junior.
I don't want to hear that junior word next to my name. Cody and I shared an office.
That's right.
How was sharing an office?
It was good for the first few hours of the day because Lovett wasn't there. He'd usually come in on his electric scooter around 11:30.
In a t-shirt and shorts.
This is not a joke.
He'd finally put a suit on whenever he had to go to the bathroom.
Right. Well, basically, I'd wear the t-shirt and shorts. I'd bike in, but during the summer months, I'd switch to the electric scooter so I wouldn't sweat through all my clothes. And then I'd stay in the t-shirt and shorts and work until I had to leave the office again, at which point I'd put on my suit. And I'd have to alert people, like, don't come out. I'm putting on my suit.
I ran a tight ship, people. So here's a question, because I've thought about this too. Do you remember which speech finally made you stop feeling like, I'm just a fraud, how did I get this job?
I don't know if any did.
Come on.
Oh, I don't believe that.
No, you eventually get more comfortable with it, but I think, I don't know if it's a thing about writers, but I think I will always feel like a fraud, not worthy of writing for him. Yeah. But I ultimately got more comfortable with it. I mean, not to blow smoke, but you were an incredible mentor who taught me how to do this.
That's why we invited you on this program today.
Yeah, so I could blow smoke.
Was there like a mentorship program you applied for? I didn't get any of that.
The results are clear.
I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to think about it.
What was the first big speech you remember writing for Obama?
Tucson,
right?
Yeah. That was the first big one. And that normally you would have done that, but you were working on the State of the Union address, which was only about 2 weeks away. And then you had to rewrite the opening to the State of the Union address because, Congresswoman Giffords was shot in that attack.
And I should say, this is the thing about speech writing, and we all know this, is the anxiety and the workload of speech writing is directly related to how many people you have doing the job. I know that sounds simple, but like the worst time of my professional career was when it was just Adam and I on the campaign and no one else was helping us. And I remember when that happened in Tucson, and I was sitting there working on the State of the Union, and now he has to go deliver, go to a speech at a memorial service immediately, but also we have to finish the State of the Union. I did not have a lot of stress then because I was like, well, if Cody's going to handle it, Cody can handle it, and I don't have to worry about that. Just having the team and having people with different skills on the team. Like a correspondence dinner comes up, and that could take a whole year, and Lovett's going to handle it, so that's fine. We're good.
It's a strange thing just in general, right? Because speechwriting is this artistic, long-form, time-consuming week or multi-week process grafted on top of politics, which is very technocratic and very much rooted in 30-minute meetings all day. And so it's like, people always say like, you work in the White House, what's the day like? And actually for a speechwriter, every day is kind of different. Like if you're a communications person in the White House, if you're a policy person in the White House, you get in at 7:30, you do your morning call, you do these responses, you respond to these emails, you figure out what's the next day's about, you write the memo. But for speeches, it's this cycle of work and it's this strange thing. And so it does really depend on having people around who can like kind of slot in, right, to each of these different big speeches coming down the pike.
Yeah. And so talk about the process for Tucson a little bit, since that was such a...
I think, first of all, I went into your office and said, what the hell am I going to do here?
Right.
And then, I went up and talked to him and Pluff about what we were going to say. And another thing about two things. First is that we should say off the top that, Barack Obama was actively involved in every single speech, often rewrote big sections of them. It's not like we just...
It's not just a disclaimer that we had to sign some agreement to say. Like
right.
It's real.
It's a very real thing. And I think people have seen enough of Pete Sousa's photos to know that's true.
Yeah.
But what also goes into his speech is what's actually happening around it, in the real world. And pretty quickly after, even during the events of Tucson, you saw people start pointing fingers and getting angry and blaming one another. And that's kind of what became the context for that speech.
I remember that. I remember in that meeting too, he said, I want to speak like I'm going to, like a friend passed away or a family member passed away, and I'm going to the memorial service and giving a eulogy sort of about that person that I knew. And so I want it very human and personal, and I don't want it too political at that point.
Yeah, and with every eulogy we've done, and we've had to do far too many, the first part will always be paying tribute to the victims, telling their stories. And then the second part will usually be, what is our responsibility now that they're gone? And that changed over time. Tucson, he didn't get political. Newtown, he did.
Right.
Because you had to at that point. Dallas, Charleston, all had political components to them because we have responsibilities to prevent that from happening again, to live up to the people that we lost. Tucson, the end of it was, I want this democracy to live up to this little girl's expectations. This little girl, Christina Taylor Greene, who died in the shooting, who had just become active, who went to see her congresswoman, which is a patriotic thing to do, who ran for student council and was gunned down in a supermarket.
Yeah.
Such a strange thing that it's the hallmark of this administration that time and time again he went and did these these memorial services for a bunch of dead people who were killed in a mass shooting over and over and over and over again.
And you don't think about that going in. I remember when we went to the White House, we were all excited. We were like, we get to write about moonshots and State of the Union addresses and commencements and big things. And you never think that every couple months you're going to have to give a eulogy for something or other.
Yeah, it just never ended either. So I left the White House in March of 2013. I think about a year before that, you moved we started sharing an office together.
That was my favorite year.
It was
of the White House.
It was a fun year, and
that
partly
it was that my feelings are hurt now.
love it was gone.
I left, things really brightened up,
and partly it was. I mean, you were deputy director of speechwriting at the time, but sort of wanted to make sure that when I left, you'd be ready. What was the transition like for you on your side in becoming chief speechwriter for the president? Like, what did you go through there?
I went through spasms of panic and fear. But what helped was spending all that time with you for a year, watching your interactions with him, getting to spend more time with him. I remember you came back from a trip with him. I think you guys were out here in LA for a fundraiser or whatnot. And the way you told me was, you wanted to talk to him on Air Force One and said, look, I'm thinking about leaving in the next year or so.
I remember what happened is we had just been out to LA and we saw Lovett. And he was like, how's Lovett doing? And I told him about the cult classic 1600 Pen. And I got all excited about it. He's like, that sounds like you sound really excited about that. Like, you might want to go to LA and do that. I'm like, I do. He's like a couple of years from now after the administration's over. And I was like, yeah, maybe a little sooner than that. He's like, what? You want to leave? And yeah. And then I told him not to fear.
Yeah, and I remember the way you told it. He said, well, what are you thinking about a replacement? And you said, I think Cody. And he said, I think that's right.
He did. And he wanted to get to know you even more. I mean, I think one thing about speechwriting that everyone should know is I do not think you can be a speechwriter for someone successfully without talking to that person. And I think this is true of politics and government. I've said this to a million different companies and organizations that we've written speeches for. Like, there's a lot of times where communications people are like, okay, you can just go through me and I'll tell you what the principal wants to say and then you can write it. And I was like, it is impossible to write for someone unless you know that person.
And you see this over and over again. There's this vicious circle for speechwriters who don't have a good relationship with the principal they're writing for, which is they try their hardest to be innovative and be creative and write a great speech, but they don't know the voice of the person they're writing for. It goes up the chain. It gets rejected. The principal is losing confidence in the person they've hired. And so then that person starts kind of sanding down the corners, trying to be safe. And then the speeches get more and more boring. And the senator or the congressman or whatever gets more and more tired of this person. And this person who could have been a great speechwriter never had a chance to do a good job. And, you see this in a lot of campaigns. You've seen a lot of, say, failed presidential campaigns.
Yep. And so I always made sure everyone on our team got to spend time with the president in the Oval. If you had a speech that was out of town, you got to travel with him. It's the only way it works.
Yeah.
And I remember telling Samantha Power, she came in and asked for advice on hiring a speechwriter when she became UN ambassador. Because like our boss, she's an extraordinary writer in her own right, won a Pulitzer. And I told her, whoever you hire, you have to spend time with that person. Take him with you, take her with you, and it ended up being a friend of mine, Nick Steinberg, who's a brilliant writer for her. And I said, you have to spend time with this guy, like every single day, every single
trip. It's funny. It's easily the most important piece of advice about a speechwriter. Like, it doesn't, you don't need to be the world's best writer. You don't need to have the best political judgment. You don't need to be the hardest worker.
Personal plug.
But you have to do all those things, and you have to have access to the person you're writing for because it's about that relationship and your ability to harness their voice.
That's the thing. People always ask, how long did it take you to get his voice? And it took a few years. And I would say my first couple years, especially on the campaign, were more mimicry than anything else because I hadn't met him yet because everything was going through you, getting edited. And it's really kind of mimicry until you actually meet that person, work with that person, get inside their head.
And we didn't spend a lot of time with him during the campaign because he was traveling all the time.
I never met him on the campaign.
We were all I went on the road once in a while, but we were mainly based in Chicago. So it was actually a lot better during the White House because we ended up like with a weekly meeting with him to talk about the speeches for the week. We got to meet with Axelrod every day because you could sort of gain through osmosis through Axelrod about what the president.
Smiths.
Hello, yeah, we would go. All of us would go see Axelrod every day, every speechwriter, and we'd sit in his office, and he'd walk in, usually like rumpled and late from something, and just say,
like,
"Hello."
Have a donut in his pocket.
Yeah, and on his shirt, and he would say, "Hello, wordsmiths," and that's how we'd start the speechwriting meeting.
Yep.
And there's also just the edits. Like, you try as hard as you can to get a person's voice, and then you'd write the speech and you think you captured it, and then President Obama would cross something out and then write a paragraph beneath it, and it's like, oh, that's how he sounds.
Missed it. Cody, what was the hardest speech you've ever written? Not like emotionally difficult, but I've been staying up for weeks and I can't figure this out. And
State of the Union addresses are always like that, but only because you're trying to cram so much stuff into it, and getting the structure right is the hardest part. Once you get that right, the rest is easy. I still don't want to call those the hardest. They're probably the most time-consuming and annoying.
yeah.
Charleston might have been the hardest.
Oh yeah.
Because we can do our best, and I'm sure you went through this with the race speech in '08. We haven't lived the experience of a black man,
Right.
So that's a difficult thing to try to empathize, and no matter how many people you talk to, he will eventually have to take control of that speech, the president, and take it to a place where we can't reach.
Also, could you imagine one of us thinking like, oh yeah, the real meat of this speech should be the concept of unearned grace?
Yeah, right. I was like, well, in my theological background.
Where did that come from? Because I mean, this is obviously the speech where the president decided to sing "Amazing Grace" at the end of the speech. One of, I think, the best moments in his 8 years in the White House. How did that start?
This was again a speech where, circumstances outside the White House kind of dictated the way it would go. We were sitting in the Oval on Monday, I think, of that week, that incredible, crazy week where the Confederate flag came down, Obamacare was upheld, marriage equality was upheld, and the Charleston speech happened. And we were trying to figure out what to say. And I confess, I was kind of mentally and emotionally exhausted from all the times we'd had to go give speeches after mass shootings. And I was like, I got nothing left.
I think he was too. I remember I saw him at a fundraiser earlier that week in LA, right after the shooting had happened. And I remember hearing him speak and I was like, man, he sounds down.
Yeah, and I've seen him angry twice, ever. The first was the day he was told that healthcare.gov was a catastrophic failure, which, by the way, works great now. Check it out.
Yeah.
And the second was the day that the Senate failed on background checks.
Right.
And I remember in his anger right afterwards, he's like, what do I say the next time this happens in a eulogy when our Congress has made it clear they're not going to do anything about this? So that was kind of the context for a discussion around Charleston. But then something incredible happened, which was the families of the victims all forgave the killer in court. None of us saw it coming. And he was like, that's it. That's grace. That's what I want to talk about. And, so I agonized for a few days over draft, gave it to him. And in the span of 5 hours, he'd crossed out the last 3 pages and handwritten them himself, all about this concept of unearned grace. It's the free and benevolent gift of God. And I was like, well,
okay.
Thanks, Obama.
This is Pod Save America. Stick around. There's more great show coming your way.
This episode of Pod Save America is brought to you by Sherry's Berries.
Let's say you're a chief speechwriter to the White House and you're working late and your girlfriend's kind of pissed and Valentine's Day is coming up. You know what? There's some chocolate-covered strawberries from a little company called Sherry's Berries.
She deserves it. Well, you're stuck in the White House.
And by the way, we don't even need to be gender normative about it.
Send your boyfriend Sherry's Berries.
Men love chocolate-covered strawberries, and they love receiving them as a gift.
When are you going to settle down, love it?
Okay. That is not for Sherry's Berries. Okay. That is a larger conversation.
All right, guys. For Valentine's Day, you're going to want to send your loved one some Sherry's Berries. They're freshly dipped strawberries starting at just $19.99 plus shipping, or double the berries for just $10 more.
Double the berries?
Just go to berries.com and use our code CROOKED. Help support our show by supporting our sponsors. Use CROOKED. Again, visit berries.com, BERRIES.com. Click on the microphone in the top right-hand corner and type in CROOKED. That's berries.com and use our code CROOKED. Go get some Sherry's Berries today. We got a sample sent to our house, and I think Emily and I ate the whole box at 11 o'clock at night.
I think Crooked Berries is Trump's nickname at the Ritz-Carlton in Moscow.
Oh, boy. That's code CROOKED. Thanks, guys. I always thought the best part of our job was waking up in the morning, going into the White House, and hearing that he has a lot of edits.
Yeah, it was the best.
Which you wouldn't think. You'd think like a speechwriter would be like, oh no, he rewrote all my shit and now he doesn't like it. But when
It's
he had
great.
real edits, you'd get these yellow pages back and you'd read them and you'd just be like, ah, yes.
Right, like
that was it. I missed it. That was
It
it.
makes
Right.
sense now, and it's better.
You
Yeah.
don't want, if it came back with nothing, it could mean anything. Right?
Well, sometimes it did come back and it was like, I want to see you and talk
and
about
then
it.
that's the worst.
Yes.
Right, but if it comes back with nothing, it can mean he didn't engage with it or thought it was fine. But if it comes back with a bunch of edits, a bunch of line notes and things, that means you gave him what he needed to do his job.
Yeah. And that was true of the Correspondence Dinner speeches, too.
Yeah.
Should we
Yeah.
talk about how the first Correspondence Dinner that we ever did, Cody, you ended up as a pirate?
I think you guys forced me to do that.
I think we did too.
well, so it's,
Poor Cody, like he becomes the chief speechwriter for the president of the United States, and when you Google your name, the picture that still comes up is you dressed as a pirate next to the president. Let's talk about how that came to be.
But that was the first correspondence dinner, right? And it was this insane period, right? He's dealing with the financial crisis. He's dealing with all these different things. That was like the era of, okay, we're giving a speech on science, but there's a topper on pirates, the bird flu, and the Volcker rule. So that was the year of, that was like, Captain... Was it
Captain Phillips?
Captain Phillips. I'm the captain.
I'm the captain now.
But it was when it was a real event, and we dressed you up like a Captain Hook pirate.
Yeah,
because we said the joke was like the president has also promised to meet with leaders he doesn't necessarily agree with, which is a promise he made during the campaign.
Well, and there was like a Washington kerfluffle because I think Hugo Chavez like gave him a book at the Summit of the Americas or something.
Someone handed him a book,
and he was like, "What am I supposed to do? Throw it in his face or something?"
Yeah, they were mad. He took the book. God, the things that used to be fucking scandals before Trump was president. Holy shit!
Yeah. Like Obama,
he took a book.
Like, he took a selfie at Nelson Mandela's funeral. That's like a Morning Joe topic for 2 weeks,
Unbelievable.
So the joke was that he had said during the campaign that he would meet with foreign leaders without precondition. And he was like, look, here's a photo of me, taking a book from Hugo Chavez. Here's a photo of me meeting with the leader of the pirate rebellion. And that was me.
And you were just dressed as such an old school pirate. Did we get a parrot on your shoulder? I can't remember if I tried.
I've still got it.
You have the parrot?
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
I
drove around from costume shop to costume shop to get that done for you. And you handed him Peter Pan.
I want to talk about, I think, one of my all-time favorite speeches that Barack Obama has ever delivered, and I can say this since I had zero part in writing it, the Selma speech, the speech he gave at the anniversary of Selma a couple years ago.
It's my favorite.
I don't know that we've ever talked about sort of how that came to be, what his thinking was. From the outside, what I remember is he was scheduled to speak there for like a month or so. It was coming up. And then a couple of weeks before the speech, that's when Rudy Giuliani, still causing trouble today, said, I don't think Barack Obama loves his country, or loves this country, something like that.
It was, he started out by saying, I know this is a horrible thing to say, which is your first clue that you should just stop talking.
Yeah, that's not good. Also, I'm not a racist, but is also a bad sign about what's about to come out of someone's mouth.
But it was along the lines of he wasn't raised like we were. I don't think he loves the country like we do. And it's the same kind of dog whistle bullshit we put up with for 8 years, like Barack Obama is some creepy other,
Yeah. But I figured when he said that, I was like,
boom.
This whole speech now, not a direct response to Giuliani, but an indirect response to that kind of thinking.
Yes. So, no matter what, you can write a beautiful speech just commemorating what happened at Selma. And
Easy thing to do.
Yeah. Just say, God bless America and go home. We went into the Oval and I was like, hey, you heard about this, right? He goes, yeah. And I was like, well, let's, talk about that. Let's address it indirectly. And the wheels started turning. He was like, yeah, let's talk about the idea of America, what it means to love this country, what it means to be a patriot, who defines what an American is. And, gave us all sorts of incredible ideas for this speech that were true to his vision of America going back to the 2004 speech in Boston.
Yes.
Which is that people who love their country can change it. This is a country founded on the idea that we are imperfect. It even says to form a more perfect union. And we have the tools with a system of self-government to do that. And people have done it at great risk to themselves throughout history. Let's tell that story and plant Selma firmly in it.
It's also, it happened before Trump, but I think it's maybe the best response to Trumpism from the president that I've ever heard. And everyone should go read it because it's still, I think it is the best distillation of Obama's view of patriotism and American history.
What makes America exceptional.
Yes.
It's patriotism for adults is what it is.
Well, but I've always thought that the 2004 convention speech was notable because what he tried to do was redefine the concept of patriotism as not just flag-waving, mindless sort of...
We're the best.
Right. Or as he said in Selma, not stock photos or airbrushed history.
Or
right?
feeble attempts to paint some of us as more American than others.
Okay, guys, people are listening to this. Okay, I can't have that. I can't have us quoting the speeches at each other.
Look, just because you don't remember a great quote from an Obama speech.
Well, that's some of the great stuff he can do. Like,
I remember tons of stuff. I'm here to lighten it up, Cody.
That's some of the great stuff that Barack Obama does with his edits, though. Like, I thought I had written a good draft. It was true to what he wanted to do. And then when you start getting edits back, and we got lucky that week because we had a snow day too, so the government shut down. I think it was either the day before the speech or 2 days before. So all of his meetings were pulled down and we could just hand drafts back and forth all day. And he'll come back with a couple different kind of edits. One that just ties together everything you're trying to say in a way that you couldn't reach. and then others that just make your language better. The first example was he added in the line about, not stock photos or airbrush history or feeble attempts to paint some of us as more accurate than others. That is just a shiv, rhetorical shiv right there.
Yeah.
There were other ones where I probably had some pedestrian line like, they endured beatings, and he turned it into, the billy club and the chastening rod, the tear gas and the trampling hoof, the gush of blood and splintered bone. And I was like, okay.
He's an author.
Sometimes he just proves that he can dunk on you.
Yeah, he enjoys doing that.
Yeah.
I know there's probably a lot of Lovett's taking the place of a lot of people who are going to be like, oh God, these Obama people and the Kool-Aid.
I have
so
a role
gross
to play. I drank the Kool-Aid. I drank
took it
later.
down.
I drank it later than everybody else. I have to tell you, the Kool-Aid for me is like kind of hit slowly over many years. Man,
what did you love about Barack Obama?
What did I love about him?
No, I was going to say it's a silly question, but it's also like about his speeches and his style and like what made you think this guy has it.
I remember in the 2008 primary, I always found him really compelling, and I'll be honest, like I really liked him, and I'm not just saying that in hindsight. Like I did really like him.
From the Hillary side of things.
The last sort of hook I had to hang my hat on was, let's not pretend it's not a risk. Like, so the way I was thinking about it in 2008 is that we just couldn't elect John McCain. We had these 8 years of Bush. The country was in shambles. Like we needed to elect someone, and fool me once, but I genuinely had adopted the position that, look, I know Hillary Clinton can beat John McCain. I believe Barack Obama can beat John McCain, but I'm just not sure.
Right.
And so that was enough to scare me. And I also think that a lot of the attacks on Hillary have been unfair over the years. But I remember, I think maybe it was around the race speech, or maybe it was even around the Iowa JJ. I'd see him give these speeches, and I remember I'd turn to somebody and be like, hey, do you remember who lost to Kennedy? Neither do I. And I think that Barack Obama ran on this platform of optimism and change, but ultimately that's not what was called for from him in the first 2 years of his presidency, which I think are the 2 years that in many ways will define his legacy. What was called from him is maturity, responsibility, being circumspect, being an adult, treating people like adults, making hard decisions. It turned out that he ran on this platform of change, and he did bring a great deal of change. But the qualities that were actually background, and actually probably really just undergirded what made it possible for him to win, even if they weren't the part of his platform, his humility, his decency as a human being, are ultimately what I think made him an extraordinary president. And I am not, like, there are people I think who talk about politics, and they're like, I'm just looking for someone who inspires me. And it's like, well, no. I understand saying that inspiration is a tool, but if you're saying you need to be inspired, you need to grow up, because that's not what politics is about. Politics isn't a TV show. It's about actual problems in people's lives. Like, I am glad Barack Obama is inspirational, but I don't need it. I need a politician who can do things. And so to me, like, that's always been my tension with the people that are like, why isn't Hillary inspiring? It's, well, is that for you, or is it because you believe it's useful to win elections?
Well, I think part of what Obama's inspiration, though, is it is a challenge to get your ass in gear and go do something, right? I mean, it was always, look, the we versus the I of Trump, I think, is one of the biggest contrasts there, right? Yep. And it sort of got lost because it was like, Barack Obama, he's a celebrity, he's walking on water, all this kind of stuff. But every single speech, it was always like, don't believe in my ability to bring about change, believe in yours, which can very easily sound cheesy and trite and cliche, but there is something underlying that's real, which is what the responsibilities are of citizens in a democracy.
And just one more thing also that I had to learn over time, which is, I don't know, I'm a cynic about certain things, and I believe anybody who wants to be president is insane. And that usually that these are people with a hole in their hearts that no power or privilege or attention could fill. That's been true of many of our presidents. They have a chip on their shoulder. They have something in their history that makes them search for this thing to make them feel better, to make them forget their fear of death, what have you. And I remember feeling like, I don't understand. Like, is Barack Obama a cipher? Where is this flaw? Like, where is this flaw? And I do believe, you see that over the course of administration, you see the consequences of aloofness, of arrogance, what have you. But his fundamental flaw is simply believing he was the right person to do this job. But I do believe in over 8 years that was true. So in the end, I think my fear was actually that he wasn't as good of a person as people said he was. But I really, look, we sat down with him for that last interview, which, Cody, you helped make possible. And I was just you talked about it. He never got cynical. But he was just unshakably decent as well.
Yeah.
He really is a decent man.
Well, and that takes discipline, I think, too, because it's pretty easy to pop off, as you see from all of us. I get asked a lot, why did you leave? And I usually say because I was really fucking tired. Why did you stay? You stayed for a long time.
You shut the lights off, man.
2,922 days. It's funny you say that because I remember, grabbing you, Favs, for a drink back in 2008 when we were still in Chicago. We were at a tavern on the Park. And I asked you if I was going to come to the White House, and you were like, yeah. And I told you that night that if you took me to the White House, I would turn the lights off.
Yeah.
And I meant it. That's not the full reason I stayed. It's because I couldn't imagine leaving. And you'd put in enough time. You'd been there since 2005. I mean, that's a lifetime, especially going through that first campaign.
Yeah, I go my 20s.
And, there were...
That's why we're kind of reliving them now.
That's true.
2013 and 2014 were brutal. Just slogs.
So helping out the Obama Foundation, which, we've been doing for a little bit for last year, and they were asking to help put together sort of a narrative of everything that happened from birth through the end of the administration. And I remember, and Tommy and I were going through it all, and when we got to 2013 and 2014, we tried to pick out the events from that year, and I just looked back, and I was like, those were bad years. All the events were bad things. It
was awful, man. ISIL, Ebola, Ferguson. God, what am I forgetting?
Well, just also just an obstinate and despicable Congress.
Healthcare.gov.
Yeah.
Ted Cruz doing his thing.
Who weren't willing to lift a finger to help ever. I mean, that's one of the paradoxes of Barack Obama's presidency, getting back to this whole we thing, is that this was a guy who, and it's not like he came up with the idea that, we have to do things together in democracy. It's a thread that runs throughout our history. It was the whole point of the Selma speech. But once he got there, a lot of America just placed their faith in him to get it done. Go force these things through as long as you have 60 votes in the first couple of years, and then you have an intransigent opposition. And the wonderful kind of backlash to that is what we're seeing now. The past 10 days have not made me more optimistic, because I still was, but watching people do all these protests and now taking on this democracy, because you have to carry on without Barack Obama, do this without him. This is like the Selma speech come to life.
I mean, it's true, but it's also, there's a lot of people that supported and were enthusiastic about Barack Obama who disappeared. They just disappeared, and we didn't get them out in the midterms.
Oh, in 2016.
No, 2014. 2010. That didn't turn out to take the House back, take the Senate back. I mean, the obstinance of Mitch McConnell, it worked. I mean, it did work.
Yeah. What was it like in the White House when Trump won? Because, we asked POTUS this question during the interview, which was what was sort of the principle behind the restraint you've shown during the transition?
And he'll always be POTUS to us.
And that's true. And he never broke, right? Even in private, he's never said oh fuck, I can't believe it. He's just, there is something bigger than just sort of the public persona there and why he's acted like this. But talk about the day after when you guys all went back into the White House.
It sucked. Rhodes and Pfeiffer were actually in my apartment watching returns that night, and POTUS called, I think around 2 a.m, saying, we got to write something a little different than we were expecting. And the short-term thing of it, a lot of people are asking me too, why is he being so deferential here? Why is he insistent on a peaceful transfer of power for someone that wants to tear up everything you've done? And my response has always been, in a year or two where almost every democratic norm has been shredded, the one that the president has sole responsibility to maintain is the peaceful transfer of power. And he's going to do it because he reveres the office. He believes in this democracy. It sounds quaint and naive, but he actually really does. And he remembered how George W. Bush did all that for him in the beginning too. But it was brutal. And there are a lot of, I've lost campaigns before, so I knew what it was like, but there are a lot of young people still working in the White House for whom this was their first job. So they've never lost anything. And there are people in tears, and you had to tell them, look, I still believe this is going to be an aberration in our history. There's going to be a lot of damage over the next few years, and it's going to be pretty brutal on a lot of people. But people will look back on this. They will read Selma, for example, as one of the first speeches about the future and be like, what were you guys thinking for 4 years?
Yeah, I do think of it like there's an America that's dying, and it's going out with like a supernova. Some stars just die and fade away, but others explode brightly before they disappear. And I think Trump is a supernova of a kind of politics we're saying goodbye to.
The future's still on our side.
Let's make it so. One last thing. President always, this has been reported a couple places, President has referred to you as Hemingway. We think that's just like, that didn't really come from Ernest Hemingway.
No, there is nothing Hemingway-esque about political speeches.
So how did that come about?
That
Give us the real story here on Pod Save America.
this is the first time this has ever been told.
Nice. Breaking news.
It has nothing to do with writing or beards. It was.
I thought it was the beard.
It was not the beard. I think the beard probably helped, but it was 2014. We were on a European trip. We were flying back from Poland to Paris, and then we were going to go up to Normandy for the 70th anniversary of D-Day. So I'd written the D-Day speech. I was really excited about it. I worked my grandfather's unit into it, even though he didn't fight in D-Day, but in other beach landings. And gave it to the president on the plane, hoping he would look at it so that, if he liked it, I could get a little work done and maybe we could go have dinner in Paris or something. So he comes back on the flight and goes, "This is great. I have no edits. I'm really happy with this." And we're like, "Excellent." So finalized the speech. About 12 of us went out for dinner together, like all staff, just having fun. Because, it's one of the great things about foreign trips is you're working constantly, but you also get to spend an hour or two at night seeing a new city. So that hour turned into Ben Rhodes and Terry Zuplat and Ben Holzer and I just decided to spend the night going out in Paris. And then we decided to watch the sunrise over Notre Dame and walk back to the hotel just as everybody was loading the motorcade. And so somebody dimed us out to the president as we were getting on the plane in the morning. He comes up, he's like, "Whoa, Movable Feast is back." And that was it.
They were a lost generation.
Yeah. I'm leaving out parts of the story.
No, I think that's probably wise.
Yeah.
Cody, thank you for doing this with us.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
And thank you both also for making the speechwriting team as immensely talented as it was.
Thanks for hiring me.
You two were a huge part of that.
It redounded to my benefit.
It'll be interesting to watch how Trump's speechwriting operation fills out.
I mean, Stephen Miller's already off to a great start.
If you thought OMB's edits to the State of the Union address were bad, wait till you see Vladimir Putin's.
And with that, we will see you later, guys. Thanks Cody.
Thank you.
Bye.